All right, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Future Year Radio Podcast. Got a special episode today, an in-office, in-person episode with Reuben Zielinski of Redux. So, Reuben, thanks for coming into St. Louis to our office here. How you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, Dave. Thanks for being here. Thanks
Awesome.
for the invite. And, it's a beautiful day out here. I think we're going to have some fun today recording this and doing some other things.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last few years, and along with all the really cool things that you've done with Redux, as I've gotten to know you a little bit, I've actually just been blown away with your kind of life story and your career, the things that you've told me. I've only heard bits and pieces here and there, but you fit the mold perfectly of the kind of person that I love to interview. So if you wouldn't mind, maybe just kind of go back to your career start, and then maybe we can just kind of segue it to the point to where, we get to Redux ultimately.
Sure. Okay, well, as my wife says, land the plane. So
land the plane.
If you want to listen to it, and if the listeners want to listen to it. So my dad was a toolmaker. I grew up on a grape farm, and so I was spinning wrenches as a kid, working on engines. I'm talking 5 years old. I'm one of 9 kids, and my older brothers helped me and stuff. So I was always working on tinkering, taking stuff apart as a kid. On the other hand, I was really good at math and science in school. I was just a really, really good student, and it came easy for me. And, in high school, I really didn't work real hard. I wanted to go to vocational school, and my counselor said, dude, you're going to college. So he threw that application away, and he proceeded to enroll me in, calculus and analytic geometry and physics and that. Wind the clock forward a little bit. I didn't go to college right away after school. I worked at a roofing company. So, and all these other things I know how to do. Used to put shingles on roofs, put gutters down, put commercial roofs on, like buildings like you're at right here. And one day I was thumbing through a book there was an engine. It's a Wisconsin engine company. I was looking at how a magneto works. And of course, my 2 brothers are electricians. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty interesting. I decided to enroll. So I enrolled in a 2-year school, State University, New York at Alfred, which is about 3 hours south of Rochester, New York. And I took my first course in circuit theory, and I fell in love with it. So that was kind of like
Circuit theory.
Circuit theory.
What did you fall in love with about circuit theory?
Kirchhoff's voltage law, Kirchhoff's current law, evidence theorem, the method of superposition, all the resonance. I mean, it was just fascinating for me. It was all in the world. It still gives me chills. And that was, I was in the early 80s. Anyway, I decided after, it was a 2-year school, associates in electrical engineering technology, that I had to continue on. So I transferred and I went to Rochester Institute of Technology in electrical engineering. So that was a 5-year program. So 1 year it was co-op mandatory. So you had to work a year as part of graduation. So I had 3 years to go. So we're walking, it was the summertime, and a bunch of guys were walking around, and I know this is kind of long-winded, but this is actually where it started.
Yeah.
And here's a sandwich sign out in front of the administration building saying, these companies used to advertise that they're coming on campus to interview. And here's a sandwich sign, IBM, the 8 bars, coming to campus. And all my buddies go, man, I'm going to that interview. I'm taking that interview. And me being a hayseed from Dunkirk, New York, I go, who the hell is IBM? That's no joke. And they're like, that's the biggest computer manufacturer in the world. I said, okay, interesting. Well, secretly, I walked away and I said, well, if these guys are going to take the interview, I'm going to take the interview. Okay. So interview day comes, let's say it's, a week later. And lo and behold, I'm talking to the guy and he goes, I see you're from Dunkirk, New York. I go, yeah. And he goes, I went to school at Fredonia, which is a State University of New York school right next to Dunkirk's for SUNY Fredonia. We started talking about the bars and stuff. And, did you go to BJ's, this and that. Son of a gun the next day if I didn't get the call. Now, I had the grades, but, so I started IBM in a lab, learned the fundamentals, reliability engineering, got hired full-time. Then I asked and was allowed. I got a master's degree at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, in mechanical engineering. And actually was offered by 2 professors there. They wanted me to study as a PhD student.
Okay.
And my daughter was born, and I'm like, man, I don't want to go live in an apartment. I was living in a house. I had a new car, and I'm like, I don't want to do that. You know, I probably wouldn't have been talking to you today, you know, if that wouldn't happen.
Right.
And then IBM took a falter. I decided to get close to customers, so I went into sales. And I spent 4 years in sales. And when I was in sales, I got an MBA part-time when I was working at nights. So that's kind of the education aspect. And when I was in IBM, one of the customers, I had a lot of customers, Xerox, Kodak, Corning. They used to scare the crap out of me talking to those guys. Those guys are smart. Bausch & Lomb, Bristol Myers Squibb, and a couple of guys at Bausch & Lomb like me.
And what were you selling?
Actually, I was selling technology. Okay, so that's actually a very good question, because IBM at the time was selling, you know, they're traditionally mainframes and mid-range computers, right? But Gerstner came on and said, we need to use our services on the outside, and we need to demonstrate our value. And so it never ceased to amaze me that every time you'd ask to go for an interview with a VP or a president or just have a discussion, one of these big companies, they would always accommodate you because they wanted to know what this IBM guy wanted. It was freaking awesome. I got into these doors all the time. Normally I wouldn't get into. You know?
Yep.
Anyway, we'd sell services or technology. So, for instance, like Bausch & Lomb, their eyewear division, Ray-Ban, they coated gold on some of the Ray-Bans, right? And they were wasting all kinds of gold. And I said, well, I got a guy down in Binghamton, New York, at the Endicott, IBM Endicott facility, that is an expert in electrode development. We can design an electrode specifically, electroplating electrode for you, and we could save you $10 million a year in gold. What we want for that is we want $50,000 up front for the consulting contract, but we want 5% of the savings.
Nice.
And so that's the kind of deals that I got.
Okay. Interesting. And so was it just a wide variety of these different sort of cost savings through technology?
We built boards for Corning. They called it a gunfighter project. It was a new type of TV. Bausch & Lomb back there again at the contact lens division. We actually built them a $35 million contact lens manufacturing system.
Wow.
Yes, that was one of my first sales the first year I was there.
That's fascinating. So I was kind of picturing a very like commodity based sale, like a cookie cutter thing, but it was like more like tailoring a solution for your.
Always tailoring a solution and trying to understand what they needed and then take that information, translating it back into our guys back in the factory or in development organizations and coming up with a solution or at least a proposal.
That's fascinating. Okay. So was it your job to at what point did you determine what they needed? Would they come to you and say, hey, IBM consultants, we need this thing built, or would it sort of stem from the problem and then you would reverse engineer it?
They never came to us with
the solution.
Right.
Yeah.
It was always, we're having this problem. And, we had what are called account execs in each of these companies, or for each of these companies. And the account execs knew I was pretty good in front of customers and, I could talk turkey with them. And so they'd want to get me in. And that kind of led to the demise and why I left there because, next thing I know, I'm flying down to New Orleans. I'm going to San Francisco. I'm going to Minnesota. You
were the guy.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't the guy, but I was one of the guys. And I got pulled in so many directions. And my kids were younger and I didn't want to miss them growing up.
Yeah, totally.
Bottom line, I just didn't. I just said, no. But
so that's a really interesting sort of like foundational learning experience. I mean, because how many of those? It sounds like you were kind of like brokering the solution, right? Like,
yes.
Hey, I can solve this problem for you. So first step is I need to sort of develop and design the solution, but then I need to source that more or less for you, right? So the amount of connections that you made and just the interesting kinds of business like insight that you garnered at that point, I'm sure was like probably pretty translational into the rest of your career.
Another one, we had this manufacturing competency center, technology center, was in Boca Raton. Now in Boca Raton, IBM used to make all the laptops and personal computers there. Of course, we know what happened to that business. They gave away the design and, everyone else makes them and they went to this micro channel or whatever. They goofed the whole business up anyway. But, they had this technology center there, and I brokered a deal for those guys, and they actually built the first MRI machine for GE.
Wow. Okay.
All the detectors that go around in the ring. Yeah. IBM did that. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. So this is a huge history lesson, on IBM for me, because I always just pictured IBM as like they made mainframe computers and then like laptops and stuff like that. But no, they were like a solution sort of shop that you would hire, like you would almost like a McKinsey today or something like that.
And that's exactly that when I went into it, that was the transition. They transitioned to what was called global services. So they didn't have that, but when I was in there, my territory was Western New York. Then it was upstate New York. Then it was all the East Coast. Then it was, it kept growing every year. And pretty soon it was production industries. I'm part of global services.
So like that example that you gave about the guy for Bosch and Lomb, the Ray-Ban, example, and like you were able to provide them with cost savings around the amount of gold that they were using. I mean, did you have that connection prior to that? Like, how did you start to kind of develop these solutions, if you will?
That's a good question. So how that started is the account exec would introduce me, to either the VP of Ops or the VP of Engineering or the president. Mm-hmm. We would start talking about different things. I said, well, it's kind of a cliche. What kind of problems are you having? We don't ask that anymore, but maybe over lunch it'd be like, hey, what's your biggest headache?
Yeah.
And we'd start working on that, and with the various, I've always been like an innovative guy, so I'd start thinking about, well, I worked on this in the factory, and I worked on that in the factory. I bet you I know 3 or 4 guys I could pull together, and I could help with the solution.
That's so cool. I mean, again, I think that like that's a very translatable thing into any walk of life, is like building a Rolodex of partners, of people that you could use for different instances.
Sure.
So why don't you share then how you then went from IBM into the next ventures and what you took with you from IBM into these ventures?
So one of my customers, Mike, and we'll use his last name, he left and he went to Bristol Myers Squibb, Convatec division, ostomy and wound care devices. Okay. And he called me up and said, hey, I want you to do a little consulting project. And we went to all these different factories. And I think one was here in St. Louis, to be honest with you. I remember. It was the first time I've ever been out here. Anyway, after I wrote a consulting report and I said, this is what I think we could do. And then a week later, I get a call from one of his guys and said, we want to hire you.
Okay.
Turns out they were going through a massive change in the company. They wanted to reduce costs. They wanted to automate. And Mike needed a guy to sell the organization. I was in sales. He liked me in sales. It was a technical sale that I could sell to people. And so that's how I transitioned to it. And it took me 2 weeks to decide, because here I was 13 years into IBM, kind of almost halfway, I'm saying, to retirement. And, I'm like, man, going into something unknown. What happens if there's a recession? And Mike goes, Reuben, he goes, they're medical devices. There's never a recession. And so I said, you got me.
Yeah.
So I went into that, and I did that for almost 3 years. Okay. And I went into a startup company.
Okay. And so you, let's talk about that.
Yeah, the startup company was Songbird Hearing.
Okay.
That was started by Sarnoff Labs in Princeton, New Jersey, funded by J&J. They had created the world's first disposable hearing aid. This was a hearing aid that we manufactured for $8.75.
Wow.
Okay. Lasted 90 days, every 90 days, because of all the problems we have with them, particularly moisture. Okay, which I've had recently.
We'll get to.
Yeah. You throw them away and you buy a new pair, and they were offered for sale at the audiologist for $39.95.
Wow. Okay.
So we would sell them to the audiologist for $20. They would mark them up and sell them for $40. The problem at the time was OTC was not allowed. So J&J's vision was they'd be hanging on a hook, just like you buy readers in Walmart now.
It was basically cheaters.
Yeah, exactly. And we had 9 formats, and all this. And I think they were going to fight the FDA at the time. But, they wanted to buy the company, and kind of, shortening the discussion on this one. And our guys said, oh, it's worth $2 billion, and whatever they offered, and the deal fell apart. Mm-hmm. And the company kind of went down to tubes because no one wanted to fight the fight with the FDA.
Gotcha. Okay. So then you get your first exposure to the audiology market that way.
Yeah, met audiologists, understood how they think. They're mostly STEM people, science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And so, they got scientific background. So I knew they had to convince them scientifically, because their industry is based, their profession is based on science. Okay, and that came back, recently when I started.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So yeah, I find it interesting that your road then started to kind of lead this way into audiology, but then as I understand it, you kind of deviated and went back. So what happened after the Songbird?
So, Songbird failed. It failed because, we didn't have the sales. Here we are. We made a production line to make 6 million hearing aids a year. And, I worked many nights till 8 o'clock at night and got back there at 6 in the morning. Whatever. That's sawdust. It's history. Then I had the startup bug. I went to a company, Viteris, which was up in Fairlawn, New Jersey, and they made an iontophoretic patch, which is a patch that takes a battery, boosts it up to 30 volts, and basically pulses, and it drives drug into the skin. So we were driving lidocaine into the skin. It was originally started by Becton Dickinson. They wanted to put insulin in the skin without taking a shot. Now they have needles and everything, or little, pumps and everything. Right? But at the time, it was interesting. So we had a hydrogel patch, electrode, and it would pulse and it would put lidocaine. So it would numb your hand about the size of a quarter, and that would be for kids to get a shot if kids were afraid to get a shot. So it'd numb it maybe about an 1/8 inch down into the dermis and epidermis, numb it up so the kid would get a shot. I found a problem with the product. We validated the line. I brought the product home. I tried it, and the thing shocked me.
Oh, boy.
And I said, and I go back, and I won't use his name, but I said, CEO, I said, hey, we've got a problem. He said, go talk to the R&D guy. None of them would put it on. None of them would validate what I said. And I said, you know what? I've been down this road with Songbird. I know it's going to fail. These guys are going to get this thing back and dump truckloads, right, from the customer. And, so I started looking around.
So there you go. So you had a couple of different startup failures.
Yeah. Which was immensely important, by the way.
Yeah. What would you say is important about that period of your career? Because you were kind of riding high, 13 years, IBM.
Yeah.
Palm at your hand. You were traveling a lot.
Yeah.
You made the active decision to go elsewhere and take that experience with you. But that had to have been a little bit, a little bit of a downer, of a downer that, here it is. And I'm so smart. And yet I've, kind of entered into back-to-back startups that failed.
Well,
that's kind of humbling.
Yeah. This is where you're, you got all the tools in your tool bag. You got the education. And so, you got to say, yourself, I can basically do anything I want. So the HR director that was working at Songbird, okay, his name was Keith, super guy, still stay in contact with him. He went to Cardinal Health, just north of where I lived in New Jersey. And I didn't know anything about pharmaceuticals. And he said, there's a lot of stuff here, Reuben, that's technical. We could use a director of engineering here. Perfect. So he sends me a couple emails. Next thing I know, I'm interviewing for the job. I don't know anything about a glass fluidized bed dryer at the time. I don't know anything about a compounder. I don't know anything about micronized spray balls. I don't know anything about this stuff, And by the time I left there, I spent, I went there in 04 and I left in 07. I was an expert.
Yeah.
And so I jumped into it feet first. It was awesome. It was pharmaceuticals, technologies, and services. So it was like a $50 million division of a, I don't know, at the time, Cardinal Health was probably $80 billion.
Yeah.
So you could get all the capital you needed, but they left you alone. It was awesome. So it was just, it was kind of like a playground every day,
Interesting.
A serious playground, though, because we had big customers.
Yeah.
So we're making batches of product for Merck, for J&J, for, all of these big companies. And, we kind of liken ourselves, it's kind of called, we used to joke about it, bottom feeders. These are all the products that these big companies don't want to make anymore. They're kind of a pain in the butt to make.
Mm-hmm.
But we take them on because there was good money in it.
And that was Cardinal Health's business model?
Yeah, that was Cardinal's, that pharmaceutical technologies and services. Yes, that was.
Okay.
So they acquired 16 companies, and that's how they made PTS, right? One of them was a soft gel company. It was Shear, the guy's first name, but anyway, he invented soft gels down in Florida.
Interesting.
So I actually got a couple patents on soft gels.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get to that. But I guess I'm curious, so you go in, you said, I knew nothing about pharmaceuticals, and then you joined Cardinal, and but you did kind of have all this technical experience, and that's your aptitude, more or less, is you're kind of a technical guy, technical sales guy. What was that learning curve getting into that whole pharmacology side of things?
Well, my boss was a PhD pharmacologist. His boss was a PhD pharmacologist. There was 200 scientists that worked there, mostly PhDs. So I just started going to meetings and I absorbed it, man.
Osmosis.
Yeah. I mean, in 6 months, I kind of knew the process, what you had to do, what you what you couldn't do, and what you had to do, and all this stuff. And it became a lot of fun because I was like a personable guy. I had that experience in sales. So, selling people and just, the rah-rah approach, but, also with the technical background. It was a lot of fun. I really had a lot of fun.
What were some of the things that your fingerprints were on within Cardinal, like that year?
I started the metrology lab. They were spending a crap ton of money on the outside, having all this equipment.
Okay.
Calibrated. And and pharmaceuticals, and maybe in your business, or in our business, no big deal, you move a scale. In a pharmaceutical company, if you move a scale a foot, you have to have it recalibrated.
Interesting. I can imagine that.
Yes,
yeah.
because, in pharmaceuticals,
precision.
You're baking a cake, basically.
Yeah.
You get the powder out, you get the egg out. It's all of these different things. And, it's done by check-by. You weigh this stuff. You look at the time, the clock, you write the time down. Another person checks everything you just did and writes that down. So, I mean, it's serious stuff because people are ingesting this, right?
Yeah.
I forgot where I was going with that.
Well, I mean, I think it's like so they were spending a ton of money on it.
Oh, right, the metrology, right. So I said, you know what, we ought to buy some instruments and we ought to start doing this ourselves. So we started a whole metrology lab. Well, of course, there was a couple quality people that came from other industries there, and they're like, well, we know how to do this better, Reuben. And they were just power hungry. And, all right, you want to take it over.
Mm-hmm.
But I started that one there. There was a couple products that Cardinal Health didn't want to have made. The PhD, the formulation guys didn't know how to make them. And I came up with ways to make them. This was in soft gels. Okay. One of them was called a liquid conveyor. Okay. It was, rather than this thing, it was mechanizole nitrate. It'd fall on a conveyor and it'd flatten out. It was like a football. And it was a suppository. And I said, we ought to use the oil that we use, fractionated coconut oil, make a liquid conveyor, chill it, and drop in there. These things came out perfect. We were able to charge the customer, I won't use their name, we were able to charge the customer a $400,000 a year technology access fee. Wow. just for developing that.
Wow. Okay. It's a really cool career. I mean, these are like huge seismic deals and you were kind of cashing them one after another. It's
another one on that was we transferred a line from Swindon, England. Cardinal Health had a plant there, and it was for Claritin.
Okay.
Claritin Ready tabs. So those are the lyophilized tabs that you put on your tongue and it just dissolves like that. So I learned all about lyophilization and vacuums and vacuum dryers.
Mm. Okay. So we're getting there.
Yeah, we're kind of getting there.
We're getting there. Okay, cool. So I just find this all to be just so interesting in terms of like, I just keep thinking about like, Reuben that graduates college that, you're at the career fair, you come across IBM, it's like life just sort of happens. You end up there. You were pre-positioned well. I mean, it sounds like you had, again, the right sort of skill set and the right aptitude to take this kind of thing on. But I just find it so cool that it's like, you do this first part of your career is really building that foundational skill set. And then, you wind up at a place like Cardinal Health, $80 billion company, but you're able to kind of like treat it like it's like, in your words, like a playground. It's a lab more or less, that you're basically doing what you were doing at IBM, but in just a sort of a modernized format.
Sure.
And with, you had these, you had this big backing, but, ultimately at the end of the day, you were like a solutions engineer. You were kind of like Willy Wonka, but, developing like all these different pharmacology solutions and stuff like that. But I guess the root of the common denominator across all of it is just kind of like clever ingenuity of like,
yes,
I think that I can come up with a more efficient way to do this or that. Like you're just more or less identifying problems and trying to figure out a better solution for that.
So I, first of all, one is fundamentally is anything I do or work on, it can't involve new physics. So I stick with the physics that we know right now anyway, right?
Known physics.
Yeah, known physics. So I'm not one of these guys.
Dark matter.
Yeah. Forget that. You know what I'm saying? I want, if I'm going to come up with a solution, it better be something that we know about, I can read about, and I can prove in the lab. Mm-hmm. Second thing, you bring up a good point. I've always had the knack of, I'll look at something and I'll just turn the problem like 13 degrees and just look at it from a little different angle. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And say, okay, I get that, but what if we tried this or what if we tried that? And all these different experiences, I know all about this different technology. And so I can plug something in, just, lickety split, and we got something we're working on that's exactly what we're going to do next year.
Well, there you
We'll
go.
get to that.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, cool. So let's carry on. So you're at, you have this stint at Cardinal. And
Cardinal Health, and my wife, my kids are getting older. My daughter goes to college. My son's about to go. My wife, as I told you in the car, she was concerned that I was burning myself out because I was getting there. I was going. I didn't have any time during the day to go to the gym. I'm a big exercise guy. Not I like to lift weights and get on an elliptical. I've never been a runner or anything like that. I don't want to wear out my knees and my hips.
Yep.
There's plenty of those. My kid's going to be an orthopedic surgeon. He's
set.
He's replacing those every day. Anyway,
Disposable hips.
Yeah, kind of. They only last 15 years, by the way.
Okay, all right. I'll keep that in mind.
They won't do it on a guy like you or me. It's got to be a little later. Anyway, maybe me. So she's thinking I'm getting burned out. And right about the time, the company was acquired by Blackstone in New York City. Schwartzman was the guy's name. We renamed it Catalyst for Talent. Catalyst. I was on a retention package. I could have stayed there, but I was getting burned out, because the pressure now was up. And a buddy of mine, Ron DiCamillo, he's a recruiter. He said, "Hey, I got a wonderful opportunity out in Noblesville, Indiana for you." And I said, "Geez, where the heck is Noblesville, Indiana?" and so, I go out there, and it was a breathing circuit company. At the time, it was King Systems. And since it's been bought by Ambu, but they made intubation tubes. So when you go under, if you have an operation, they intubate you, and they have put it on a breathing machine. And those plastic airlines are what we made. They were like corrugated, and they made the preeminent breathing circuits and masks and intubation, in the United States and in the world. We shipped them everywhere. Well, Reuben, we want somebody to automate this. Okay, everything was being made. So I looked at it, and, typical Reuben. I said, "Well, yeah, I'm sure we can do it. And sign up for this, So I get there. A week after I'm there, they lay a consultant document on me, and they say, "Well, your job is," there was 3 plants, one in Noblesville, and then we had a rubber plant that made the rubber part of the mask, the gloves, and what else did they make? I can't remember. Anyway, and then we had a CPAP company out in San Diego. Your job is to move all 3 of these plants to Mexico in the next 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Displace 1,200 jobs. And I'm like, what? Come on, you guys didn't tell me this was. So anyway. So I go through the document, and there was a whole bunch of assumptions that were labor assumptions, this and that. Anyway, I convinced the board that we needed to re-engineer, then to automate, and then we could consolidate into one. Along the way, boss came along, first got along, and I ended up leaving because he wanted. I'd say, I'll never forget. Went to a board meeting, and I said, the board of directors said, this is chairman of the board said, "Reuben, this is a wonderful 3 to 5 year plan." And before I could even answer, my boss said, "We're going to do it in 18 months." And I'm like, this is, so we were hiring people, high salary guys. Anyway, I left. I transitioned out. But Santa Fe Methods. But in between that time, that's kind of when Redux started. My neighbor, Joel Trusty, his wife locked her phone in a front load washing machine and washed it. And when it came out, it was entirely waterlogged. They went to, the mobile phone retail store, and they said, there's nothing we can do. He took it to work. This guy, took it to work. This guy, his dad invented the dead blow hammer, and he knew water couldn't withstand a vacuum or heat. And he did this all day, and he recovered the phone. And he waited.
He did it with what? With dead blow hammer?
No. They make dead blow hammers at this factory.
Okay.
They use heat and they use vacuum.
Okay.
To degas the plastic. And so he brought it there. He worked on this all day in this chamber and it's heat. And like 10 hours later, he was able to recover the phone. And he took it back to the store, and they said, "If you can figure out how to make a machine," he goes, "we get these in here all the time."
Mm-hmm. What year is this?
This is in 2012.
Okay.
So he tells me about it. We get together all the time. Our wives are friends. He tells me about it, and we start thinking, I'm like, well, we need to create a machine that we can put in the stores. And that's how we started working.
Wow.
So the next day, I got some parts and I started replicating it in my kitchen. And we bought a camera at Walmart, and we bought a nanopod and all this stuff, and everything that we put in the process that we made, the little chamber, we recovered, and we knew we were onto something. So we got it patented. The Indiana Business Journal ran an article on us. Somebody from Verizon, sub-agent saw us and said we.
Yeah, wow, that's so cool. Again, just kind of thinking about the whole problem differently. I know that at the time you weren't thinking about the audiological market. I don't know how quickly your mind went there, because obviously you started with smartphones. But I think it's just a fascinating sort of, natural arc to your, all of these prior experiences. Like, again, you're a solutions engineer. You're just coming up with different things. So, of course, I can only imagine your wife is probably like, oh, God, here comes another invention. But it just must be nonstop of just looking at things and saying, I bet we can figure out a way to do this better. And so, lo and behold, you have this, neighbor that has this problem that presents itself. Oh, I have a waterlogged phone. How do we solve for this? And
Sure.
lo and behold, you guys solve for it.
Well,
and you have a new business.
Yeah. So I skipped over a couple things there. One is probably 6 months prior to that, I was working on something else in my basement, and I had a lab in my base. I've collected, fluke meters and this and that, oscilloscopes, all this stuff, a microscope. I got a pretty nicely outfitted lab. I can kind of do anything in my basement, my workshop. And I was working on something, and he was down there, and I didn't know his name is Joel Trusty. I didn't know him too well at the time. And he went in my workshop, and I was working on, a couple secret things. And I came up to him. I go, "What did you see?" Because he thought it was the bathroom.
Reuben's secret lab.
Yeah. And it was just a real funny interaction. So he was like, "Wow, man, look at all this stuff you got in here." So he kind of knew that I could do this. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why he immediately came to me with it.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So you were just literally like the neighborhood, like the inventor.
Yeah. And so, we built one, and then we built another one, and next thing you know, we got a partner, and away it went. But the one thing I recognized when we got that partner was these guys are going to generate instant sales for us. And so we didn't have that in the other two startups. That was one of the big lessons I learned, right?
Well, you had a whale of a customer.
Yeah, you got to have sales. That's the only way this is going to work. So, for anyone that's listening to this, coming up with the product, you ever listen to the, Shark Tank? They always say that's the easy part. And I know why, because I've experienced it. Coming up with the idea and then coming up with a new product is the easy one. Selling it, having that transaction for people paying you money, and, you taking your product, that's the difficult. So what you got to make sure then is the product's got to be right.
Right. Well, and so you had this huge whale of a customer, Verizon, and so that gets Redux off the ground. And again, the initial use case was for dehumidifying phones.
Well, they brought an interesting twist to it. I'll never forget this. So the first dryer we made, it was $5,500. That's what it cost, and it weighed 90 pounds. Okay, it was ridiculous. We called it the toilet. It looked like a black toilet, short but like a black toilet. Then I decided to join full time, and I said, we got to drop this thing. It's got to be less than $1,000. It's got to weigh 8 pounds, 10 pounds. And so as we did exactly that, we designed all this ourselves, with SolidWorks. I know a friend of mine that helped us with it, and we did the whole thing. We own all the designs, and we created what's called the Gen X dryer, Gen 10 dryer. It weighed 8 pounds, and it was $700 to build that outside. We could probably build that for $200.
Wow.
Yes.
I mean, again, though, it's like, how do you even start down that path of bringing something to life like that? Okay, so you got your friend who is like, hey, I have this new technique because I have a very specific job environment that we are degassing plastic in a very specific method. And he's like, I'm going to go to the neighborhood inventor, the neighborhood, Henry Ford. And then, but then, like, how do you take something like that? And that for me is a gap. I don't know a whole lot about OEMing, but like, I just find that to be so interesting of like developing the prototype and then actually going and getting that thing made at some scale. What's that process like?
Well, you bring up a very good point. A lot of people, they like, they say, wow, that's a great idea. Oh, I got a great idea for you. Oh, this would be a great invention. But a lot of people can't put the prototype together. That is so tantamountly important. You're able to put the first proof of principle together for, yourself. If you had to do this on the outside, it costs you $200,000 to have somebody build. I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
But if you can build that yourself, that's why I got that lab. Huge savings. What these guys brought to the table was, and what was an aha moment was, we thought we would just, dry phones, had people bringing in wet phones. No, they said, we'll sell memberships. I looked at my co-founder, Joel Trusty, and we couldn't believe I heard that. So what they've come up with is they'll sell a water protection package. When you're at the store, you're about to do a transaction and buy a new phone or update your contract, they'll ask you if you want a water protection package. It's $30.
Yep.
Okay. And it's a zero inventory product. We just have our dryer in the store. There's 2,700 dryers around the nation. And so we split the revenue between Redux, and they get a piece and we get a piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so amazing.
Yeah. And so they have an SKU for the membership, and your membership number is your mobile phone number. It goes in a database. So we know that you have a membership. So if you stopped at any 2,700 stores, you could dry your phone if you have a water barrel.
Wow. Okay, cool. That is a very interesting aspect to this. Okay, so then you want to maybe get into like how it then goes from cell phones and how you shuffle back over to audiology?
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out how to get into more stores, the big network and the competitors network, T-Mobile and AT&T. And there's probably a lot of reasons why that didn't happen. It doesn't matter for this discussion. But then we did some SWOT analysis, relying on my MBA, did a SWOT analysis. Where else could this be used? Knowing it could be used in audiology, knowing potentially it could be used to dry key fobs for, cars and things. But the audiology really stood out because of my knowledge and background of that, because I knew that all hearing aids get wet. And so right about that exact time that this happened, that we were doing this analysis, we get a call from a gal up in Wisconsin, Samantha. And Sikorsky, I'll give her hats off to you.
Shot.
She went into a Verizon store. She saw one of these dryers and said, you know what? Why can't I have this in my office?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I get complete water removal? So she called us up. My guy, James Shrake, and I, we take a ride up there in February, in a snowstorm. It was crazy, a 2-hour snowstorm ride. Snow was 2 foot deep, but it was in the back country. Brought a dryer with us. Okay, it was a cell phone dryer. And she took some hearing aids out of a cabinet that she did everything she could to recover them. Nothing would happen. She couldn't recover them. She put them in her dryer and they all recovered. She couldn't believe it. So we knew we were onto something.
That's unbelievable. Yeah, because I found that to be, I'll let you keep going because I do want to interject one anecdote about Wisconsin, but I'll let you keep going. So, okay, you knew you were onto something here. Obviously, this is like a novel way to dry devices. And you're right, like it's an inevitable thing. I think even the manufacturers might admit that now, that there might not be such thing as a waterproof device. And so anyway, why don't you continue on and talk about how you continued to kind of, I guess, move into this?
Sure. Well, that was in 2019. Of course, we know what happened in the latter part of 2019 and in 2020. We had the COVID-19 virus hit and kind of everything shut down. So, but we went to the IHS conference down in Nashville, International Hearing Society. And if we were on a boat at our booth, it would have probably capsized from everyone being on our side. That's how many people we had at our booth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It was just so awesome because what we were doing is we were drying people's hearing aids, and every one of them walked away and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." Okay. And we had custom tailored one of our smartphone dryers for a hearing aid dryer. We made the chamber smaller. One thing that I wanted to point out here is remember I mentioned earlier I knew audiologists' scientific background. So I wanted to make sure that there was a cause and effect. What do I mean by that? If the hearing aid sounds better, why? And so I thought it was absolutely positively necessary that we measure the amount of water content coming out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I forgot to mention we have a humidity sensor in there. That's how we get that endpoint detection. And we integrated the area under the curve, under the humidity sensor, the response. and we're able to measure it down to a tenth of.
Right. And that's always a fun sort of whenever I've had to, seen demos and, you guys are talking about the, relative amount of water that is to, if it's a bathtub, like how much that would be in a house or something like
2 bathtubs in a house, exactly, 1 microliter, right?
Yeah, 1 microliter, exactly.
So at that conference, there was another buyer there. I won't use who they were from, and they said, this thing is great. Now, this is the size of a shoebox. They said, but some of our, locations are small, and we'd like to have it about a quarter of the size.
Mm-hmm.
I said, fine. I took that back, and we came up with the Redux Pro and the Pro Link, which is a quarter size of our. It's a 4.25 by 4.25 by 4.25. And that machine uses exactly the same technology and runs the same way as the first one we developed that cost $5,500.
Yeah. I mean, it's I remember that 2019 conference that you alluded to, the Wisconsin one, because I remember that so clearly because I actually did a infection control presentation there. And in the first slide, I talked about, sort of the history of infectious diseases debilitating society. And I talked about the Black Plague. And this was January of 2020. And I remember I got the funniest email from Matt Hay, about 3 months later. And he goes, hey, dude, I just keep thinking about your presentation. Did you know something? Why were you presenting on plagues?
Right.
But the reason I wanted to tell that was because that was the first time I ever met you guys. I met you and I met Matt. And, I remember he had the glass of water and he's dunking the hearing aid in the water, with zero regard because he knew that, I was just going to put it in and show this extremely powerful demo of me restoring this product. And, I remember in some of those subsequent conversations that I had, based on my perspective as, here I sit at Oak Tree and, growing up in this business, I remember just the whole drying category being a pretty prominent thing. And, obviously there's been a variety of different manufacturers and different designs for a dryer. But I just remember thinking, this is really interesting that it's a totally novel approach to a age-old problem.
Sure.
But, now that I'm kind of sitting down and I'm talking to you, this makes total sense that, you, again, the solutions engineer, you just kind of looked at the problem and said, all right, and I think that's so interesting that you had this outside sort of, expert come in that understood problem solving in a really unique way. And like, boom, here we are today. And there's 3 different versions of this. And it's one of the more popular methods of drying, both for the professional and then now with the Redux Home unit, it's having a lot of success there too. So I just find this to be so cool of like, it's just really, we only know what we know because it's what exists. And, without you, it would just be the other more conventional methods of which at the time when those were invented were novel, right? And so I just think this is really cool that, the ingenuity that takes a lot of different versions in this small little industry, all you need to do is kind of look around and you'd be amazed at the backstory and the, kind of the genesis of how a lot of these products kind of came to market to begin with. There's always a story there, and you guys have a very unique one.
Well, in general, I like helping people, and this is going to help a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fire in my belly on this one. The money aside and all that, seriously, you only need enough money to live, comfortably. You don't, that's kind of what's wrong with society. We don't want to get off on that tangent, but people get so greedy and this, Listen, man, what's wrong with helping people? And I just want to help people. I would love to help the whole world hear better. I think it'd be awesome. And, that home unit that you've alluded to, that one there, that escaped me it took me 3 months to come up with that. Why is that? Because our professional unit has a pretty high performance vacuum pump and a valve in there and some special electronics. And, those three alone are $100. And I wanted a low cost home unit. I wanted to, manufacture it for low cost. So I had to come up with a way to create a 3-way valve without vacuum. And if you ever looked inside the guts of that, I mean, it's a really, really slick way of how we do it. We move this around, we create an airtight chamber, and that's kind of the jumping point for the next product that I've gotten. What I'd like to do is even though that's a home unit, I'd like to make another home unit that you can use for everything at home. So you can dry anything that you want at home, whether it's your smartphone, your smartwatch, your hearing aid, your iPod, anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, again, we live in an age where you have all kinds of different pieces of technology that are on your person.
Can't live without them.
Yeah, all day, every day. So it makes a ton of sense that you would kind of continue to branch onto that. When we were kind of driving over here from the airport, you had mentioned the vision that you had around the branding, which I found was really interesting about kind of the concept of, and some of the different, I guess, case studies and other products that you were kind of taking some cues from, more or less. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So from the beginning, we wanted to leverage our brand. We want to, we've had all kinds of ideas. Let's create, cleaners. Let's create this. Let's create that. No, Redux is a drying system. That's what we want to be known for. And when we broke into the industry at the audiologist, I knew that we had to convince them that's how we were going to make this stick. Okay. And so now that we've done it, we've done exactly what we set out to. We set out to create a preeminent dryer that works like no other dryer and that the audiologists support. I view the audiologists very much like dentists, okay? And our product very much like a Sonicare toothbrush. Okay. At first, the Sonicare toothbrush was very expensive. It was marketed and sold through dentists. Right?
Mm-hmm. Exclusively,
yes, yeah. Now they've come down in price, like we talked about in the car. I don't know. You get them at a super center or something. You may get 3 of them for $190.
Right.
And everyone uses those, whether it's Sonicare or Oral-B. That's the kind of it's been proven to be the best toothbrush is sonicating toothbrush, whether it's circular or just vibratory. Right. We want to do the same thing with our dryers. We want to the audiologist and the dentist, you still go to the audiologist to have your hearing checked. You still go to the dentist to have your teeth checked. But, you got your home dryer to keep your devices tuned up, and you're going back to the audiologist or whoever to have them checked out.
Well, like I said to you, it really is a clever approach because, you think about the ideal customer is the guy or the gal that's going into the audiologist with chronic issues saying, I sweat a lot, my device is constantly waterlogged, or, it's getting impaired in some fashion by the amount of moisture that's in there. So these are the people that are already probably on the edge that are seeking out the audiologist because of this. And then, they're the ones that are
early adopters.
They're the early adopters. They're the ones that are actually even aware that this exists. And I was telling you, I said, one of the initial aha moments I had with your device was, in some of the early conversations that I had with Matt was, and James was, kind of this struggle of how does this thing get positioned? Is it something that you charge for? Is it a membership kind of thing? And what dawned on me was wait, no, this is a clinical tool. This is like an audiometer. This is like, any other piece of equipment that professional relies upon on their day-to-day. But the really interesting thing now that you have the home dryer is that you can basically say, hey, that tool that we have that basically dries out your device, there's now a home version of it, and that's the Sonicare model that I think is super interesting, where you're able to actually kind of drum up some, really organic awareness of the brand. Those then become your major advocates out in the field, because those are the customers that need it the most, right?
Need it the most, exactly right. They can't hear without it. If their devices go, and go on the fritz or whatever, they can't hear. That affects their quality of life. It's clinically proven if you suffer from hearing loss and it's not corrected, it leads to dementia. Absolutely clinically proven. A couple of things on what you said. There's a book, I can't remember the name of the author. It's called Crossing the Chasm.
Mm-hmm.
And
Clayton Christensen.
Yeah, Christensen, exactly. And where we're at is we want to get this majority now. We're after the majority. Okay, how do we get that? We need to broaden the use and reduce the cost yet again. Because what we're after is there's 1.7 billion smartphones sold around the world every year. There's 7 billion in use. There's almost 200 million total wireless hearables sold every year.
Yeah.
Okay.
AirPods
and you name
Galaxy Buds.
Everything, right? Everything. I mean, you look around. I mean, everyone has these in their ears.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, so we're making this a legitimate drying solution through professionals that say, yes, this is the best drying solution. If it works for hearing aids, by God, it's going to work for AirPods and phones.
Oh,
because that's how we started.
Yeah, 100%. And again, I think that it's a great tool for the audiologist and the professional to lean on and again, kind of be the point of access for that device and say, you know, it's a terrific way to sort of establish a relationship with a potential patient or, you know, just another member in your community that can sing your praises. I mean, to your point earlier, you know, if you're genuinely happy, if you're genuinely making the customer happy and you're helping them, they're going to sing your praises without you knowing it all the time.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so there's a compounding effect there, I think.
One of my mantras is customer service, and that goes back to my IBM days. They had 3 basic beliefs. One was customer service, excellence in everything we do, and respect for the individual. So, you know, everyone needs to be treated with dignity. You need to provide the best customer service you can, and you got to make the best products you can.
Yeah, those are good words to live by there. I love it. So, you know, as we kind of come to the close here, again, thank you for coming in and doing this. I found your whole story to be so interesting. And again, just the, you know, kind of like learning about you as a person and, you know, your knack for just kind of being an ingenious, you know, inventor, you know, always just coming up with different ideas. It makes total sense now of like why this thing exists and what you're going to do with it into the future. But I guess, you know, for anybody that's listening out there that might have an idea, you know, I've got this invention that I want to move on or I want to start a business, something like that. I mean, words of wisdom in terms of that, if you're just getting started out, you know, what's some wisdom there for somebody to just consider?
Probably the best thing that someone can do is learn how to tinker.
Tinker. Okay, I like it.
Okay.
Iterate.
Exactly. And so, yeah, okay, you want to, I don't know, I want to design a new type of paper airplane. Okay, well, you don't just sit there and draw the darn thing. Start making them, right? Fly them, right?
Yeah.
Change the tail, change this, change that until it's like, wow, man, I can soar this thing 50 feet and I can make it out of paper and it might only cost me 13 cents. Then you might have something. So I don't want to, you have to be able and willing to put the time in to tinker. Okay?
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it, but I had this product one time. It's called Trailer Tracker. And now we got cameras on trailers, but my brother gave me an idea that when a tractor trailer turns a corner, you know, they lose the blind spot. They can't see, you know, and you can just visualize that. I came up with this. I put an encoder on the fifth wheel on the trailer, and I had these movable mirrors. And I spent literally probably 1,500 hours in my basement and the workshop building that, machining it. I bought a little machine center, developed the microcontroller code, all of this for this, you know.
Wow.
And it kind of went nowhere, and there's reasons for that, but that was just another lesson. But you got to be willing to tinker. You got to be willing to put the time in to come up with a proof of principle. And, you know, and once you have that, the next step is even bigger, but at least you got that.
What about where to turn to, you know, from like a mentorship standpoint, an advisor standpoint? I mean, any lessons there from your history and your experience of how to cultivate that, how to identify that, and what's the right way to sort of, you know what I mean? I think that I just continue to put myself in the shoes of the aspiring, you know, entrepreneur that's never really embarked upon this and might be incredibly lonely.
Well, that's an awesome segue into the next phase that's really hard. I tell everyone I meet, any engineer that is under my tutelage, anyone that works with me, you need a stint in sales. Because there is nothing more humbling than being in sales.
Being told no.
But there's nothing more satisfying that when you learn how to get that transaction and make that sale, it's just an awesome feeling. I remember when I first went into sales in IBM, It was, and this will be the last story. I got a million stories, but I remember this story like it was yesterday. And it was right after the holidays. It was in the Rochester, New York branch office. You're talking 300 people in the sales office, right? And, it was a Monday. And I just started now. I started in January. It was the first week I'm there in the sales. Starts on a Monday. By Friday, I'm the only person in the office. Think about that. I'm the only person in the office because I didn't have any customers to call on. And I stared at that phone for hours.
Waiting for it to ring?
Well, no, wondering what I should do.
Yeah.
Who I should call. And my boss at the time, he goes, come here, I'll help you. And he actually had some real good relationships at Corning. He called him and said, I got a new guy. He wants to come down and make a sales call on you. And that's how I got started.
That's awesome. Yep. A lot of words of wisdom, a lot of things to kind of, take for anybody out there. I think there's a lot of things here that are interesting and then also potentially applicable.
Yes.
Because I think that one of the things that I've found to be really satisfying about doing this podcast is meeting. I've just been blown away that we live in this, or we operate in this small little industry, relatively speaking, and yet I feel as if every day I'm meeting a new, really interesting sort of entrepreneurial kind of person, and so I know that energy sort of like exists. These people exist, and I always wonder how many people are sort of like waiting to start. How many people have an idea? How many people are ready to take that plunge, and like they just need maybe a mentor. Maybe they just need a nudge in terms of like, do I have permission to start? You don't need permission. You can just start, right?
Start.
I feel like this is, one of the commonalities across all these conversations is just people's own sort of decision-making and how they got to that point to where they made the decision to take that leap. And I'm trying to kind of understand like what's universal across those different divisions. Well, and there's not a lot of.
Yeah, well, I can tell you can't be afraid of failure. Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple failures, as I mentioned, in these startups, and you just can't be afraid of it. You gotta get right back up on that horse and start riding again.
What'd you say? It's sawdust.
It's sawdust. Yeah, I sawed that wood, man. It's sawdust.
It's sawdust. It's in the past.
It's in the past.
Well, Reuben, I couldn't thank you more for coming on today and coming in to St. Louis and doing this in person. It's a lot of fun to do the podcast, even more fun to do it in person. So thank you for coming on. Thanks for everybody who tuned in here to the end, and we will chat with you next time.
Dave, I got to say it. This bud's for you.
This bud's for you. Boom. And on that note, we're out.